I can still feel the weight of that champagne flute in my hand. It was one of those crystal ones. The kind that costs more than my entire first paycheck from the diner. Heavy. Cold. The bubbles were still rising when Evelyn leaned in. She smelled like Chanel No. 5 and contempt. Don't get too comfortable, honey. Her voice was low. Just loud enough for the front row to hear. My sister heard it. My aunt heard it. The photographer probably heard it through his lens. My son's money is for family. Not for a charity case from a trailer park. I didn't cry. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I just stood there in my dress, the one she'd picked out, by the way, because mine wasn't appropriate for the family standard, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't sadness. It was colder than that. The rain started about an hour later. Not during the ceremony, because that would have been too poetic. No, it started during the reception, right when they were serving the $200 per plate dinner I didn't choose. I watched the water streak down the tent windows and thought about the studio apartment I'd given up to move into Marcus's condo. The one Evelyn owned. The one she reminded me she owned every single time I rearranged a throw pillow. My sister, Jamie, squeezed my hand under the table. You okay? I nodded. I was lying. Because in that moment, with the rain hammering the tent and Evelyn laughing with her country club friends across the room, I made a promise to myself. I was going to win. I just didn't know the game yet. Let me back up. I met Marcus at the diner where I worked. Rosie's 24-hour on Route 9. The kind of place where the coffee tastes like burnt rubber and the pie is the only thing worth ordering. It was a Tuesday. 11:47 p.m. I remember because I was counting down the minutes until my shift ended at midnight. He came in alone, sat at the counter, and ordered the pie. Apple. He didn't look at his phone once. That was the first thing I noticed. He left a $20 tip on an $8 check. I thought it was a mistake. I actually ran out to the parking lot to give it back. He laughed and told me to keep it. Said I looked like I needed it more than he did. He wasn't wrong. At that point in my life, I was living in a 400-square-foot apartment with 2 roommates who weren't on the lease. I was eating 99-cent ramen 4 nights a week and counting quarters for the laundromat. My car was a 2003 Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and a check engine light that had been on for 8 months. I was 23 years old and I was tired. Marcus started coming in every Tuesday. Same time. Same order. We'd talk during the slow hours. He told me he worked in finance. I told him I was saving up to go back to school. He didn't ask what happened the first time. I liked that. We started dating 3 months later. He was sweet. Thoughtful. He remembered things. Like how I took my coffee. Or that I hated roses because they reminded me of funerals. He brought me sunflowers instead. But Marcus came with Evelyn. I met her on our 4th date. He said it was just brunch. Casual. No big deal. It was a very big deal. She showed up in a cream-colored pantsuit and sunglasses that cost more than my rent. The restaurant was one of those places where they don't list the prices on the menu because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. I was wearing a Target dress and sandals I'd bought on clearance. She looked me up and down like I was a stain on her tablecloth. So you're the waitress. Not, you're Marcus's girlfriend. Not, nice to meet you. The waitress. Marcus laughed it off. Said she was joking. But Evelyn wasn't smiling. She spent the entire meal asking me questions that weren't really questions. They were tests. Where did you go to college? I didn't finish. Oh. What did your parents do? My mom cleaned houses. My dad wasn't around. I see. That, I see, hung in the air like smoke. She paid for the meal. Made a point of pulling out a black Amex card and sliding it across the table without looking at the bill. Then she looked at me. Marcus is very generous. I just hope the people in his life appreciate that. I should have walked away then. Looking back, I should have seen it coming, but I was too tired to care. I wanted to believe that love was enough. That if Marcus and I stayed together, she'd eventually warm up. I was wrong. We got engaged 11 months later. Marcus proposed at the diner. Our diner. Rosie's. It was cheesy and perfect, and I cried for 20 minutes straight. He told me he didn't care what his mother thought. He said we'd build our own life. He was lying. Or maybe he wasn't. Maybe he really believed it. But Evelyn didn't. The wedding planning was a nightmare. She insisted on paying for everything. And I mean everything. The venue, the flowers, the dress, the photographer, the cake, the string quartet, the valet service, the $50,000 wedding I didn't ask for. At first, I thought it was a peace offering. Like maybe she was trying to accept me. But every decision came with a string attached. I wanted a small ceremony at the Botanical Gardens. She booked the Rosewood Estate with a 200-person guest list. I wanted wildflowers. She ordered white orchids imported from Ecuador. I wanted my cousin to sing during the ceremony. She hired an opera singer from New York. And every time I pushed back, Marcus would say the same thing. Just let her do this. It makes her happy. And it's free. It wasn't free. I paid for it in 1,000 tiny humiliations. Like when she told the seamstress my dress needed to be less revealing because I looked desperate. Or when she uninvited my best friend from high school because we need room for the Aldridges. Or when she seated my entire family in the back row, behind her tennis partners. But the worst part? Marcus didn't fight for me. He just stood there, nodding, while his mother erased me from my own wedding. The napkin thing happened 2 weeks before the ceremony. We were at Evelyn's house, the mansion, really going over the seating chart. Marcus was in the other room on a work call. It was just me and Evelyn at the dining table. She slid a piece of paper across the table. A napkin, actually. One of those cloth ones with her monogram stitched in gold thread. Sign this. I looked down. It was a post-nuptial agreement. Handwritten. Not even typed. It said that in the event of a divorce, I would receive nothing. No alimony. No claim to any assets acquired during the marriage. Nothing. This is insane. This is protection. For my son. From what? I'm not after his money. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Then you won't mind signing. I didn't sign it. Not that day. But Marcus asked me to. He said it was just to keep the peace. That it didn't mean anything because we were never getting divorced anyway. I signed it 3 days before the wedding. I still have the napkin. The wedding day itself is a blur. I remember walking down the aisle and seeing Marcus's face. He looked happy. Proud. Like maybe we'd actually pulled it off. And then I remember Evelyn's toast. She stood up during the reception, champagne flute in hand, and smiled at the crowd. I've known Marcus since the day he was born. I've watched him grow into the man he is today. Strong. Intelligent. Successful. She paused. Looked at me. And I've always prayed he'd find someone who loved him for who he is. Not for what he has. The room went silent. So here's to Marcus. And to his beautiful bride. May she prove me wrong. People laughed. Nervous laughter. Like they didn't know if it was a joke or not. I knew. And that's when she leaned in and said it. The thing I told you about at the beginning. Don't get too comfortable, honey. My son's money is for family. Not for a charity case from a trailer park. I finished my champagne in one swallow. I smiled at her. I said, "Excuse me," and walked to the bathroom and locked the door and stared at myself in the mirror. My makeup was perfect. My hair was perfect. My dress was perfect. I didn't recognize the girl looking back at me. Here's the thing. If you were in my shoes at that moment, would you have walked away or stayed to fight? I'm reading the comments right now. I want to know. Because honestly, I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I wasn't going to let her win. The first year of marriage was suffocating. We lived in Marcus's condo. The one his mother bought for him after college. She had a key. She used it. She'd show up unannounced. Usually on Saturday mornings. She'd walk in like she owned the place, because she did, and make comments about the dishes in the sink, or the way I'd folded the towels, or the fact that I was still working at the diner. Don't you think it's time to focus on being a wife? I got a second job out of spite. Data entry. Night shift. $14 an hour. I didn't need the money. Marcus paid for everything, but I needed to feel like I was still me. Evelyn hated it. You're embarrassing him. People are asking why Marcus's wife has to work 2 jobs. It makes him look bad. I didn't quit. But I started paying attention. I started noticing things. Like how Evelyn always talked about the family business, but never actually said what it did. Or how Marcus's credit cards were all linked to accounts I couldn't access. Or how every time I asked about our finances, he'd change the subject. You don't need to worry about that. But I did worry. Because I was starting to realize I didn't have anything. No savings. No assets. Nothing in my name. I opened a bank account in secret. A small one. At a credit union across town. I started putting $50 from each paycheck into it. Sometimes $100 if I picked up extra shifts. It felt like hoarding acorns for a winter I wasn't sure was coming. But then came the necklace. Evelyn's mother had passed away the year before Marcus and I met. She left behind a jewelry collection worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. One piece, a diamond necklace from the 1940s, was supposed to go to Marcus's future wife. Evelyn gave it to me on our first anniversary. She presented it in a velvet box over dinner at her house. Marcus was beaming. He thought it was a sign she was finally accepting me. This belonged to my mother. And her mother before that. It's been in the family for 80 years. I trust you'll take care of it. I wore it once. To a charity gala Evelyn insisted we attend. I felt like I was wearing a chain. 3 weeks later, the necklace disappeared. I tore the condo apart looking for it. I checked every drawer, every coat pocket, every jewelry box. Nothing. I told Marcus. He told Evelyn. She called the police. They showed up at the condo on a Thursday afternoon. 2 officers. They were polite. Professional. They asked if they could take a look around. Marcus let them in. They found the necklace in my car. In the glove compartment. Wrapped in a Starbucks napkin. I didn't put it there. I know how that sounds. But I didn't. Evelyn pressed charges. Theft of a family heirloom. She said I'd probably been planning to sell it. That I'd always been after their money. Marcus didn't defend me. He just stood there in the living room, hands in his pockets, while the officers put me in handcuffs. I spent 4 hours at the station before they let me go. The charges were dropped after my lawyer, a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, pointed out that there was no proof I'd taken it. No cameras. No witnesses. Just Evelyn's word against mine. But the damage was done. Marcus asked me to move out that night. Just until we figure this out. I packed a suitcase. I called Jamie. She picked me up at 11:30 p.m. and I cried the entire drive to her apartment. I didn't go back. The divorce took 8 months. The post-nup held up. I walked away with nothing. Not even the furniture I'd bought with my diner money. Evelyn won. Or so she thought. Because here's the thing about rock bottom. It's solid ground. I moved in with Jamie and her fiancé. I slept on their couch for 3 months. I picked up every shift I could at the diner. I sold the jewelry Marcus had given me, costume stuff, mostly, on eBay for $300. And then I made a decision. I was going back to school. Not community college. Not online classes. Real school. State university. Business degree. I applied for every scholarship and grant I could find. I wrote essays about being a first-generation student and a survivor of financial abuse. I got $18,000 in aid. It wasn't enough. So I took out loans. $32,000 worth. I was 26 years old and starting over. I finished my degree in 3 years. I worked full-time the entire time. I slept 4 hours a night. I lived on protein bars and black coffee. I didn't go to parties. I didn't date. I didn't have time for anything except survival. But I learned something during those years. I learned how to read a balance sheet. How to analyze cash flow. How to spot a company that's bleeding money. And I started watching Evelyn's company. Hartwell and Associates. High-end commercial real estate development. Evelyn's late husband had built it from the ground up in the 70s. After he died, she took over. She liked to brag about it at parties. About how she was a woman in a man's world. But I started noticing cracks. The projects were taking longer to finish. The press releases were getting vaguer. The LinkedIn page hadn't been updated in 6 months. I spent hours in the library, the actual library, because I couldn't afford a premium business database subscription, digging through public records. Property filings. Liens. Court documents. Hartwell and Associates was drowning. They'd over-leveraged on a luxury condo project in 2019. Pre-sold 60% of the units. Then the market shifted. Buyers backed out. The construction loans came due. They were $4.2 million in the red. And Evelyn had personally guaranteed the debt. I didn't do anything with that information. Not yet. I graduated in May of 2022. Top 15% of my class. I got a job at a mid-sized commercial real estate firm in the city. Entry-level analyst. $52,000 a year. It was more money than I'd ever made in my life. I kept living like I was broke. I stayed on Jamie's couch for another 6 months and saved every penny I could. I paid off $8,000 of my student loans in the first year. And I kept watching Evelyn. By 2023, Hartwell and Associates was in freefall. They'd been hit with 2 lawsuits from contractors who hadn't been paid. One of their flagship properties, a historic building they'd been converting into luxury lofts, had failed inspection 3 times. The project was abandoned. The banks started circling. I knew what was coming before Evelyn did. Foreclosure. But here's where I almost blew it. In early 2024, I thought I'd found the perfect trap. Hartwell and Associates was auctioning off a commercial property to pay down debt. A small office building on the east side. It was worth about $890,000. The opening bid was set at $600,000. I'd saved $47,000 by that point. I got pre-approved for a loan. I was going to buy it. I was going to be the one who started dismantling her empire. I spent weeks on this. I drove by the property a dozen times. I imagined walking into Evelyn's office and telling her I owned a piece of her legacy. The auction was on a Tuesday. I showed up in a blazer I'd bought at a thrift store and heels that gave me blisters. The bidding started at $600,000. It went to $750,000 in 4 minutes. I was outbid by a developer from Boston who didn't even flinch. He paid $820,000 in cash. I sat in my car afterward and cried. Not because I'd lost the building, but because I'd gotten so close and it still wasn't enough. I thought I'd missed my shot. I was wrong. 6 months later, Hartwell and Associates declared bankruptcy. It was in the business section of the newspaper. Just a small paragraph. Most people probably didn't even notice. I read it 3 times. And then I started making calls. The bankruptcy filing was public record. I downloaded every document. All 247 pages. I learned that Evelyn's personal assets were part of the estate, including the mansion. The one she'd lived in for 30 years. The one where she'd handed me that napkin and made me sign away my future. It was going to auction. Minimum bid, $1.2 million. I didn't have $1.2 million, but I knew how to get it. I'd been working at the real estate firm for 3 years by that point. I'd been promoted twice. I was pulling in $81,000 a year. I had $63,000 saved. I pitched my boss on a joint venture investment opportunity. I showed him the numbers. The property was worth $1.8 million in a good market. We could flip it or rent it for commercial use. He said yes. We formed an LLC. I put in $60,000. He put in the rest. I took a 30% stake. I didn't tell him who owned the house. The auction was held online. I sat at my kitchen table, my own kitchen table, in my own apartment, the first place I'd ever lived alone, with my laptop and a mug of coffee that went cold while I waited. There were 8 registered bidders. The bidding opened at 9 a.m. It started at $1.2 million. Someone jumped it to $1.25 million in the first 30 seconds. Then $1.3 million. Then $1.35 million. I waited. I'd learned patience in those years. I'd learned to watch. To wait. To strike when the moment was right. The bidding slowed at $1.42 million. 2 bidders left. Me and someone else. They went to $1.45 million. I went to $1.5 million. They dropped out. The auction ended at 9:17 a.m. I bought Evelyn's house for $1,503,000. I didn't tell anyone for 2 weeks. I wanted to sit with it. To let it sink in. To make sure it was real. The closing process took 45 days. I signed more paperwork than I'd signed in my entire life. I wired the down payment from the LLC account. I got the keys on a Friday in November. I didn't go inside. Not yet. Evelyn had 60 days to vacate. I sent the notice via certified mail. Legal. Clean. By the book. She called me 4 days later. I let it go to voicemail. You have some nerve. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but this is my home. My family's home. You can't just. I deleted it. She called 6 more times that week. I didn't answer. Marcus called too. I hadn't spoken to him in over 4 years. His number was still in my phone. I'd never blocked it. I'm not sure why. Hey, it's me. I heard about the house. Can we talk? I texted back. No. He didn't call again. On the last day of Evelyn's 60-day notice, I drove to the house. It was a cold afternoon. The kind of cold that gets into your bones. The trees were bare. The driveway was long and winding, lined with stone pillars that had probably cost more than my childhood home. I parked at the top of the driveway and sat there for a minute. I could see moving trucks. 2 of them. Men were carrying boxes and furniture out the front door. And then I saw her. Evelyn. She was standing on the porch in a black coat, her arms crossed, watching the movers like a general watching her army retreat. She looked older. Smaller. I got out of the car. She saw me immediately. For a second, neither of us moved. We just stood there, 50 feet apart, staring at each other across the driveway. And then she walked toward me. I didn't move. She stopped about 10 feet away. You must be very proud of yourself. Her voice was sharp. But there was something else underneath it. Something that sounded like fear. I'm not here to gloat. Then why are you here? I reached into my bag and pulled out a business card. My business card. The one with my name and my title, Senior Acquisition Analyst. I held it out. She didn't take it. I'm here to remind you of something. And what's that? You called me a gold digger. You said I was a charity case. You said I'd never be good enough for your family. She didn't respond. You were wrong. I dropped the business card on the ground between us. You have until 5 p.m. to be off the property. After that, you're trespassing. I turned around and walked back to my car. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, holding her coat closed against the wind, watching me leave. I didn't go back to the house for 3 months. I couldn't. Not yet. It still felt too raw. Too personal. But when I finally did, I walked through every room. The place was empty. Evelyn had taken everything. The furniture. The curtains. Even the light fixtures. It was just walls and floors and echoes. I stood in the living room, the same room where she'd made me sign that napkin, and I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. It's been 8 months since I bought the house. I haven't moved in. I'm renting it out to a tech startup that's using it as a co-working space. They're paying $9,000 a month. After expenses, I'm clearing about $4,200. I bought myself a condo with my share of the profits. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms. A dishwasher that works. A parking spot that's actually mine. I paid off the rest of my student loans last month. I'm 31 years old, and I'm financially stable for the first time in my life. But here's the thing nobody tells you about revenge. It doesn't fix anything. I didn't get an apology. Evelyn didn't fall to her knees and beg for forgiveness. Marcus didn't come crawling back, realizing what he'd lost. I just got a house. And a bank account that doesn't make me panic. And a life that's mine. But I still don't sleep well on Sundays. I still flinch when I see a black Amex card. I still have the napkin. The one with the post-nup. I keep it in a drawer in my kitchen, underneath the takeout menus. Sometimes I take it out and look at it. Not because I'm angry, but because I need to remember. I need to remember the girl who signed it. The one who thought love was enough. The one who believed that if she just tried hard enough, she could make people like her. That girl is gone. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I just know it's true. Someone asked me last week if it was worth it. All the work. All the years. All the nights I stayed up studying while my friends were out living their lives. I didn't know how to answer. Because the honest truth is this. I'm proud of what I've built. I'm proud of the fact that I didn't let Evelyn break me. I'm proud that I didn't just survive, I won. But I'm also lonely. I don't talk to Marcus anymore. I haven't been to a family wedding or a holiday dinner in 5 years. I see my sister, but even that's complicated. She got married last year, and I couldn't stop thinking about my own wedding. About the girl in the Target dress who thought she was going to have a different life. I have money now. I have stability. I have respect. But I don't have the things I thought I'd have by now. A partner. A family. A life that feels full instead of just successful. Maybe that's the real cost of revenge. Not the time. Not the money. But the version of yourself you have to kill to survive. I drove past Evelyn's old house last week. Not on purpose. I was meeting a client nearby, and I took a wrong turn. The tech company has repainted the shutters. They put up a sign. The lawn looks better than it ever did when she lived there. It doesn't feel like hers anymore. And it doesn't feel like mine either. It's just a building. I don't regret what I did. But I don't celebrate it either. I just wake up every morning, make my coffee, and go to work. I pay my bills. I save my money. I live my life. And some days, that's enough. Some days, it's not. If you're listening to this and you're in the middle of your own story, if someone has humiliated you, underestimated you, told you that you'll never be good enough, I can't promise you that revenge will make you happy. But I can promise you this. You are not the person they say you are. You are not a charity case. You are not a gold digger. You are not disposable. You are the person who gets up every morning and fights. And that person? That person is stronger than they'll ever be. The money is in the bank. The house is rented. My name is on the deed. And I still don't sleep well on Sundays. But I'm here. And that has to count for something.